Hi, I'm Dex Gelfand, practitioner of what I call therapeutic spiritual counseling. And I came through the Scientology experience, among other things. And I had been a trained Scientology auditor, as they call it, back in the day. But I evolved out of that. I found much that I could not agree with about the approach and the techniques used and other things. So I have gradually evolved more and more away from Scientology type counseling. What I do now is very different. And a large number of my participants have Scientology backgrounds. And I think that while they somewhat appreciated some of their Scientology experiences, they needed something that would more deliver the promise that things like Scientology made but didn't really deliver, and without the liabilities, which I'm not going to spend time focusing on in this video. But what I'm going to do is answer a frequently asked question, which is, Dex, how is what you do different from Scientology? And it's a reasonable and relevant question, because I did evolve out of being a Scientology counselor. And I think one of the reasons I attract so many clients who with a Scientology background is that I do speak the language, and they see so many others who came through that same experience do much better with me. So the question is very relevant. So let me try and answer, because my first instinct is to say an easier question would be, how am I in any way similar in what I do to Scientology, which would be very little. Well, how am I different? Well, in Scientology, the focus is more on that pro forma generic sequence of techniques in organized levels, so to speak. I am not in any way a believer of levels. That you arrive at a level that you're better than anyone who's not at that level, or that level means that you're no longer vulnerable to the material that is taken up on that level completely, and that's a falsehood. And also that idea of sequence of processes or techniques in what is promoted as ascending steps or levels. In each one of those, you're more or less given, this is what you will get out of this. This is your goal for all of this. And the truth is, your goal is your goal. People get involved with Scientology, any form of therapy or spiritual counseling, because of what they themselves want, what you envision, what your particular goals are, what you want to be free of, and how you want to feel, and how successful you'd like to be at whatever your interests are. And that's one way that I'm very different, is Scientology does not spend a lot of focus on what your goals are for the experience. You're told to just continue through all the steps and all the levels, and at some point your issues will be successfully addressed. That's a kind of a keep hoping, hang in there, and you're spending a lot of time and a lot of money addressing things that are not what you would choose to address, or unless or until you are sufficiently indoctrinated to believe that what they do is what you need. And there's a lot of that in Scientology. My approach is, you come into the session with something that you'd like to address, something you'd like to relieve yourself of, or a state of being or functionality that you feel you should have and you desire. And we will take that up, that which is presenting, because that's the most relevant thing. See, the essence of the difference in my approach, and I believe this is what should be true for any therapist or counselor or whatever you would call it, is the only valid function of anybody seeking to help anybody else should be to help you accomplish what you are in front of me to accomplish, what you are here to accomplish, not my ideas of what you need to accomplish, not some generic pro forma sequence of subjects to address. So I believe that that's the first and primary example of where I'm different from Scientology, and for my 2 cents, where Scientology goes wrong is they want you on their program and not where your own instincts, what I call your spiritual compass, is taking you. And Scientology is very much, don't let you control the session, let the counselor control the session. Whereas I'm listening, I'm really listening. Scientology, they call the counselor an auditor, and they say that means one who listens. But they're not listening for anything except the answers they're looking for according to their instructions. And the purpose of a question in counseling, as I see it and the way I work, is to bring out in the person exactly what they need to spiritually digest so as to transcend, to be as you want to be. Not so that the counselor can get a specific answer to the question being asked. The purpose of the question should be what it allows you to digest. And it should be a question that addresses your needs, what you were talking about. It should be based on what you were talking about. In Scientology, that's a no-no. In Scientology, that's called Q&A, which is short for question or answer. And it's considered to be bad form. It's considered to be a sin in counseling. The idea that the question is based on the participant's answer. That's something that is discouraged. It's the opposite of what Scientology trains people to do. Whereas the way I work, you express something, so I'm going to address that which you express. And that's why I've had many clients come to me and in 1 or 2 sessions achieve what they spent decades and hundreds of thousands of dollars in Scientology trying to achieve, because they have their sequence of processes, which they call the gray chart or the bridge. And, well, to be somewhat humorous, but direct and truthful at the same time, is they're selling you a bridge. Think about that. As opposed to directly addressing what you want to address. Scientology uses a device called an e-meter, in which you hold these electrodes, a slight current comes through you, and there's a meter with a needle on it registering your reactions to whatever you say or whatever the auditor says or asks. And this is the basis for confirming the answers that you give. It's the basis for deciding what will be taken up in the techniques of the session. And the meter, in my honest opinion, is valid in terms of it does actually show reactions and specific needle motions that the meter makes. They do show specific things. It's not it's not a joke, you know. It's not a lie that the meter does actually show certain things. It's just a liability in counseling, because it's one of many things in Scientology that says you don't really know, we know about yourself. And that applies to every level of counseling and training in Scientology. The person conducting the session has a case supervisor, and they're the ones who supposedly know and direct what that auditor is going to do with the person in the session, and judge and evaluate how correct they were in what they did in the session. So the auditor is not given the respect and trust that he will know what to do himself. You know, these are disguised as safeguards, you know, and then there's a senior case supervisor who supervises the case supervisor. And there's someone above them that is supposed to supervise and monitor and correct them at higher levels of the Scientology organizations. And through this entire chain of command, Virtually nobody is given full trust. Everybody is given to feel that they are dependent on someone who knows better than them. And where the real fallout of this is with that meter in the session, which indoctrinates the people participating to feel that they can't trust what they think their answers or issues are, that comes from this device. And this is one of the things done in Scientology that disempowers a person, that doesn't allow you to trust yourself and your answers. I work the opposite way. I will ask questions, you will give me answers, and we will proceed from there. And in this, you recognize more and more. You give yourself more and more permission to trust yourself, which has to be one of the most important, relevant improvements that a person can have. In Scientology, they talk much about gaining certainty about things, but they never grant that you have the ability to be certain. No, the meter knows better than you. The auditor knows better. The case supervisor knows better. In my approach, every client gains more and more confidence and certainty and recognizes just how much you can trust your own perceptions and instincts. And that's where the personal power is. So those are a couple of examples, maybe the prime examples of how I work differently from Scientology. There's no programmed generic sequence of levels of techniques being done. There's no e-meter. And another thing is, we don't try to use up your time by, extending the sessions for as long as possible. What happens when you do that, and they're trying to get 2 and 3 and 4 hour sessions out of you when you got very quickly going through things, is what happens when you really have a revelation through the techniques of a counseling session. You want to allow it to fully unfold. That could take hours or days, rather than just, okay, well, that worked, let's move on to the next step in the same session. It's kind of stepping on that unfolding, that flowering, that continuing flow of self-recognition and of change and of things shifting for you. So one thing that's different in my sessions, anytime someone has something happen that for them is very profound and meaningful, and that does happen in every session I give, I will allow that person to let that fully unfold for them. You see, in a session, when some sort of technique is successfully executed and there is change, it takes some time to fully digest that most of the time. And a person should not feel rushed or forced or influenced to continue past that point, because the processing continues after that initial revelation. And so the session can end and the mental digestion and change will continue for some time afterward, unless you rush to continue with your next step or whatever is next in your program for that person, in which case you're basically stepping on that spiritual and mental expansion. I will simply ask you when it needs to be asked. Do you feel like you should continue this session and move on to the next thing we would do? Or do you feel a need to let this fully unfold and have things settle out for you? And more than 90% of the time, the person's preference is to let this fully unfold, let it settle out. They feel there's something still happening for them, some kind of percolating still going on. And because my interest is in having you get all the juice out of that experience, all the gain, all the change that you can have, to me that's more important than running up more time and having you go through more money with me as quickly as possible, which is the difference. The church works to go through as much money and time as quickly as possible. They push you through that. They make you feel like you should soldier through things and be, on the program with them to just keep going. Like there's some sort of brownie points or admiration you're given for doing that. Like, you're doing the right thing, kind of a thing. It's pressure. I work the opposite way. I don't try to mass schedule a lot of sessions in a short period of time. I basically let my clients tell me what they're comfortable with. There's no pressure. It works out best for everyone that way. These are some of the ways in which the way I operate is different from Scientology. The techniques I use are different from those of Scientology. I'm not using Scientology processes. And I'm not using them because what I use is more helpful, and there's no elements of indoctrinating a person into a system in what I'm doing. I really want to avoid influencing a person as to how to think about themselves or what they need to do. Because you have what I call your spiritual compass, your own instincts, your own perceptions, and that's the most valuable assets you have is you. And the more that you will grant that to yourself and give yourself permission to trust your instincts and to exercise your abilities, that it's okay to recognize in yourself the greatness that is there, the more you will accomplish what you want to accomplish for yourself, the more whole you will become. If anything, it's a system of unindoctrinating from all the programming a person receives. So these are some of the ways in which what I do is different from how Scientology works. I'm sure I could think of more, but I think that will do for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you find it interesting.